What's going on, everybody? I'm the lovely Rose, Diana Rose. Welcome back to the Lovely Rose Pod, working title. So I did a podcast, fucking forever ago, talking about how the CAW community, or rather doing CAW, helped me come out as trans, and still pre-op. I'm broke. I'm a broke ass bitch who can't afford surgery at the moment, with the laws being shaped the way they are. Like, fuck, I gotta go to another country in order to get this shit done. But that's besides the point. I did a podcast just talking about how CAW helped me come to terms with my sexuality, with my identity, and things of that nature. And I felt like that was a really, really strong episode, or something that really just I felt I needed to get out of there. And I'm happy. I'm proud of it. I'm definitely proud of it. I will have it up by the time you listen to this. So yeah, uh, what we're talking about has nothing to do with this. But I just want to say, thanks to those who listened to it, or maybe decided to listen to it again. Thank you. That really means a lot. That means a lot to me, like you wouldn't imagine. And I hope that I can continue to do these podcasts in the future. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about emulation, and more specifically, just talk about like how sucky it is that we are losing out on the Nintendo eShop for the Wii U and 3DS. Now, no one had a Wii U. I was one of the few people that had a Wii U, and now the Wii U is going through its own problems with this apparent bricking thing. But yeah, I had a Nintendo Wii U, and I own a 3DS. And just hearing about the fact that the eShop's closing down, it brought back like a bit of nostalgia for me. Just thinking about being able to buy games off of the 3DS eShop. Like, I remember when the Game Boy Pokemon games showed up on the eShop, I freaked. I went to GameStop and I bought, like, I think I bought all three of the little cards that they had for those games. And I put them on my 3DS, and I was in love with, like, it's like I was a kid again, being able to play these games on my 3DS, and I could transfer them from my 3DS, or from my red, blue, and yellow save all the way up to my 3DS games. And I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Unfortunately, I never did, and it's a little too late now. But it just it makes me sad to think about that, and to think that a lot of the stuff that we've had access to prior, like, we end up taking for granted. Now everyone's like clamoring about the fact that the 3DS and the Wii U eShops are closing down. People are upset about this, but this was already writing on the wall, like 2 years ago, when they were talking about it. Like, when it was being discussed, like, this was already going to happen. And the fact that no one really thought about doing anything about it, or like no one thought to maybe prepare themselves until now. And it really blew up when Gerard made that video of him buying all of those games, with the intention of putting them in a museum, which is really cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's like a blow right there. That is a definite blow, because that's a lot more than just, a small set of games, like with the Wii U, or with the Nintendo Wii shop, the Nintendo Wii shop. Like, that's a bigger blow than that. And it just emphasizes the fact that these digital storefronts aren't exactly the best way to go about playing games. Physical media is very important, but as we get further along in this day and age, physical media becomes less of a prominent thing and more of a obligatory thing. Like, they're just giving us a physical version of the game that's really just a license key that you pop into your console and you download a fucking 50 gig file, and then an extra 30 gig update on top of that. But I could go on a rant about the digital storefronts another time. I want to talk about just the idea of emulation as a whole, and why I think it's important, and why I feel like even though even though it's illegal depending on how you acquire the ROMs, I also don't see a point in making a big spectacle about it either. Emulation's been a thing since before I was born. I was born in '94. The emulation's been a thing since like the late '80s, and it was just, hey, we could probably do this on this, even though it's not meant to be. All it really was is just how much can you push certain hardwares to replicate other things, and it became a phenomenon. A lot of people were like underground when they were doing this shit, doing offhand trades and shit like that. And that's always fascinated me, by the way. Look up MVG, because he talks about some of this stuff too. But yeah, just that kind of culture always fascinated me. That's why I resonate with doing emulation, because that's how I got into a lot of old games. Because I was never really a big retro gamer as a kid. Like, realistically, I had a Super Nintendo. I had a Nintendo 64, but I was always playing the latest and greatest. And it wasn't until I got into emulation and mostly into Pokemon. That's really what it got boiled down to, is I just wanted to play Pokemon on my computer. And I figured out how, and I played it. Then I got into Sonic. Like my first time playing Sonic was on a KK Fusion. So, yeah, I mean, and this was back in 2010, 2009, 2010-ish. Like, I was a kid. I was a babby back then. And to me, I thought it was like the coolest thing, being able to play these games on your computer. And they worked. It worked really well. You had a slow computer and you can't play the AAA games? Well, hey, use emulators on it. And back then, it was like a very like, oh my god, this person's cool, they can do emulators. Now it's like a very common thing. People play emulators now. They do emulation and all that stuff. And really, like, the morality of emulation really wasn't questioned until, I'd say, over the past few months, where I saw more discussions about, is it okay to play emulator or to run emulators? Is it okay to play ROMs? And I wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents into it. And I want to just give like a couple of examples. I did have a back and forth with this person on Twitter, but I'm not going to bring it up. I did bring it up in a previous recording, and I'm like, you know what? I'm scrapping it. So my stance on emulation, on emulating games and stuff, and this does have a little bit to do with the 3DS and the Wii U eShop closing down, and I'll elaborate. So, in my opinion, like, why I emulate certain games is just for the sake of convenience, really, because I got a bunch of old games. I do. I got like 2 drawers full of old games, and I could play those. I have a way to play them, but it's a pain in the ass to set up, actually find a comfortable spot to play them at, and then enjoy it. I can't enjoy it if I'm not comfortable, and I can't really just hook up a bunch of systems that I want to play. And that's where emulation comes in. I could emulate some of these games on my computer with any controller I want, being able to switch between my Xbox controller, my Switch controller, my 8-bit Do controller, or this Gully Kit controller that has a very weird sounding button. I have that option. I have that flexibility, and yeah, I can enjoy myself there. And I think that's why I emulate. That's kind of where I stand. It's like, it's so convenient in comparison to hooking up those consoles. And that's why I do it. That's why I've always thought of emulation as, like, not a hindrance on retro gaming, but rather an amplification of retro gaming. Especially with some of these ROM hacks that come out, especially with, like, with the ROM hacks, the translations, the improvements on these games. Like, it breathes a new life into some of these games, and also it doesn't wear and tear on on the contacts of my very old cartridges. It doesn't, it doesn't break down the discs that I have in two of my drawers. It does it all it does, at least as far as I'm concerned, is kind of preserve the games that I own, which bit of a catch-22 because I'm not playing these games, like I'm not using these games, so realistically, what's the point in having them if I'm not using them? And I get that argument. But I mean, my collection is very tiny. It is like less than a quarter of even the basic collection that you see on YouTube. So, we ain't talking about me. And that's kind of where like I just said, I stand firm in the idea that emulation is a very important tool in keeping old games alive. And that's just one example, just the convenience of not having to hook up a bunch of stuff. Another thing, some of these games are really old and can't be found, except for online. And ones that can be found are upwards of $1,000. Like, real shit. Am I gonna spend $1,000 for a less than 2-hour game of Little Samson? No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna pay $300 just to play Earthbound. I absolutely refuse to. I'm not gonna spend $190 to play Chrono Trigger or Secret of Mana, or fucking or Trials in Mana. I'm not gonna spend a bunch of money just to play some of these games that came out before. Well, some before I was born. But to play a bunch of these games, I'm not gonna get hundreds of dollars out of as far as content. It's just not feasible, because then when you break down the prices, that the outrageous prices that the secondhand market puts these games at, when you really break it down, you think, I could get this game, but I could also pay a bill. I could get this game, but I could also put down the down payment on, say, a used car. I could get this game. Or I could just put that towards something that's a little more meaningful, like going on vacation. You see my point? Like, it makes no sense to pay the exorbitant amount that some of these people want for some of these games. It makes no sense. And it makes even less sense to try to justify these high prices while also demoralizing the idea of emulating. At that point, who are you really benefiting? You're not benefiting anyone. And to the people that say, well, I like to support the developers. Who the hell are you supporting if the developers don't work for that company anymore that own the game that you want, that someone else is emulating? Who are you supporting? Who are you supporting when you spend $100 on a game to support a developer that no longer works for that company, but maybe even started their own company? Who are you supporting then? You're not. The only feasible argument that I really heard about in favor of buying from a secondhand market, and this was from when I was listening to the Nintendo podcast, which is very good. I'd recommend a listen. When I was listening to the Nintendo podcast, Wood brought up a point that, well, if I buy the game, like if I actually own the game, then I feel more connected to the game. Like, I feel like that is a game that I can just reach out, grab, and play it at any time. And I would feel that physical connection. That I understand. Having a connection to the games that you play is very important for the sake of enjoyment. I can get that, and I can get behind that because I'm the same way. I also am a firm believer of having access to these games as in some capacity too. Whichever is the most convenient. And as more games kind of get ported to PC, like it becomes obvious that the having these modern ports are important. Having modern ports are important. It helps cut down on the ROM usage, the emulators, and all that stuff. You would think more companies would get in on that, but I'm traveling away from my point again. I can get behind having that physical connection, and that's one aspect of owning a physical copy that I can get behind. Now, I gave you 2 reasons why people would want to emulate. Here's another one. Maybe the company just absolutely does not give a shit about its customers, and you know what? You don't want to give them money. Why not? Go ahead, download your copy of Wind Waker, download your copy of Smash Bros. Melee, or what have you. That's fine. Whatever. You do you. That's another reason. Because fuck these companies. At the end of the day, the moral balance as far as ROMs and emulation are concerned, it should just kind of be in the middle. There's reasons to do it. There's reasons not to do it. There's reasons why people should, and there's reasons why people shouldn't. I know I just said the same point twice. I guess where I stand, I've already told y'all where I stand. I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes convenience matters the most. Sometimes morality be damned. You just want to play a game. And I feel like at the end of the day, that should be what matters, is having the option to play these games. And with a company like Nintendo, for example, who's shutting down the 3DS and Wii U eShops, they're not giving us a choice. Like, I own a 3DS and I own a Wii U. I bought all the Wii U games I really was planning on playing, and I bought all the 3DS games I was planning on playing. I bought them over the past, 10 years. So I got my fix of those. I've also modded those consoles too more recently, but that's besides the point. Nintendo has pretty much given us no choice. At this point, the only way to extend the life of the 3DS and the Wii U is to jailbreak it and jailbreak and / or mod and pirate these ROMs, these games and such, so we can extend the life of our consoles. Because, once the eShop's down, then, okay, we have to resort to the physical copies. Problem is, those physical copies go for so much money. Even the weaker first-party Nintendo titles still go for upwards of $35, $40. And that's how much they were costing. That's how much they cost when they were new. So, it really boils down to, do I want to give this person money for these games, or do I want to say, screw it, I could just do something with my 3DS, like do the seed miner thing, and just have access to all these games. Yeah, okay, I don't actually own them, but so what? It's not like Nintendo supports these games anymore. And I think that's where it kind of stands. Nintendo's not going to make any money off of the 3DS stuff after tomorrow. No matter where you get your games from. Nintendo's not going to make any money off of the 3DS or the Wii U stuff. No matter where you get your games from. If anything, they're probably going to lock your money. If you had any money left over on your 3DS or Wii U, it's locked unless you were able to migrate your funds to the Switch, which I don't know how that works. So essentially, this panic, while justified, at the end of the day, it's not going to change the fact that Nintendo is shutting down a whole ass server that gave you access to this stuff to make things accessible. They're cutting down accessibility, so we have to do this stuff. But then they want to take that away, and that's kind of where that's what I have issues with. That's what I have issues with all these people that are saying, oh, you should buy it secondhand or you should support the developers. If the developers are not giving you a chance to support them, why the fuck should you? And I'm not saying that I will never buy a Nintendo product again. That's not what I'm saying, because I have a Switch. I plan on buying Tears of the Kingdom. I plan on buying my Switch games. Because, guess what? I like the Switch. I like to buy things for the Switch. I got like 10 different controllers for the Switch that I use. So, like, it's not like I'm hindering myself of that experience. I just wish this stuff was accessible so we wouldn't have to resort to going to these random websites to download a game. Or have to download a whole ass ROM set just for one or two specific games. I wish that these games were more accessible. And these companies sit on these games and say, you know what? They'll be fine. And that's what I'm not okay with. That's the specific thing about this whole discussion that I feel like less and less people are talking about, and they're just more or less talking about, oh, well, it's illegal, or, oh, it's legal, or something like that. And I'm just like, if the companies behind these games don't give a shit, why should you? I think that's my closing argument is, who gives a shit at the end of the day? If you have a chance to play a game, play it however you're able to get this game. I'm not saying go ahead and pirate the latest AAA titles. I'm saying if you have access to this old game, whether it be a physical cartridge or a file on your computer, fucking play it. Play that game. Enjoy it. I'm all about having options. It's like what Matt Little Pixel always said. Options are important. And if these companies are taking these options away from us, then we're going to brute force our own options out to the world. So that way, no one can go without playing a game. No one can worry about having that accessibility. Because if things were more accessible, then piracy would go down. It's like with music, the music industry had less and less to worry about when it came to music piracy. Once Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, once those started existing, that was pretty much the end of music piracy. So we need, why? Because we had access. And that's what we need. We need access to a lot of these old games. And Nintendo just shut down a huge chunk of that access to the virtual console stuff, to a good deal of Kirby games that are on there, a good chunk of games that are on there that are, some are digital only. We lost access to as of the 27th. And it sucks. Which also just shows that Nintendo don't really give a shit about the consumers, and Nintendo don't really give a shit about those consoles. So there's really no moral dilemma when it comes to the Wii U, when it comes to the 3DS, when it comes to the PlayStation, when it comes to the Super Nintendo, when it comes to the NES, when it comes to all these old consoles that are not being supported to this day. There's no moral dilemma. If you have a chance to get it physically, get it physically. If not, put it on a fucking ODE. Put it on an SD card. Put it on your hard drive. And play it however you can. Because at the end of the day, these games are meant to be played. And as much as the purists don't want to admit it, these games were fucking designed on a computer in the first place. So, just saying, people who emulate on PC kind of have a bit more of leverage here. But I'm going to leave that there. What is your stance on ROMs, on emulation? What is your stance on the eShop closing down for the Wii U and 3DS? I want to know. Let's have this. I've been rambling for like 45 minutes just across this recording and the last recording. Just talk to me. Where do you stand on emulation? Where do you stand on ROMs? Where do you stand on pirating these old games? Like, I want to know. I want to hear your thoughts. And I also want to hear your thoughts on the Nintendo eShop closing down for the Wii U and 3DS. And I also want to hear your thoughts on buying secondhand. Like, let's have this discussion. Anyways, I've been the lovely Rose, Diana Rose. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.